Brenda, the Homeowners Association president, actually did it. She served Clara with a final notice of foreclosure. All because of Clara's prize-winning bourbon roses. "Are you kidding me?" Clara whispered, the crisp, official paper trembling in her hand. The document claiming her beloved crimson blooms violated Section 4.c. Subsection 2 of the bylaws, which dictated approved foliage colors and planting distance from the street. The battle over a simple row of flowers was suddenly a brutal existential war for her home, and Brenda, with her sharp, perfectly coiffed blonde bob and an appetite for petty power, was clearly determined to win, utterly convinced of her own unassailable authority within the gated community of Willow Creek. The scent of those roses, deep, velvety, almost intoxicating, had been Clara's solace since her father passed, and she planted them as a living memorial, a wall of perfumed color against the gray world. And now that delicate fragrance felt like a cruel irony against the metallic tang of fear rising in her throat. Every week, a fresh email, a digital poison dart, would arrive from Brenda. A photo of the bushes, a time-stamped accusation, another $250 fine for non-conforming aesthetic elements, totaling nearly $20,000, an astronomical sum for a few dozen beautiful bushes. Clara sighed, running a hand over the smooth, thorny stem of a Madame Isaac Pereire bloom, its petals the color of old wine. This house was her anchor, her only inheritance, and Brenda was treating the garden like a felony. "Who does she think she is? The queen of this cul-de-sac kingdom?" Clara muttered, the question hanging heavy and unanswered in the humid afternoon air. The whole neighborhood walked on eggshells around Brenda, a true Karen archetype who weaponized the bylaws like a legal machete, demanding conformity down to the precise shade of beige paint and the acceptable chime of wind bells. Clara remembered the first time Brenda confronted her, not with a polite request, but with an aggressive, pointed finger stabbing at the air. "Those roses are too vibrant, Clara. They clash with the muted palette of the community." The sheer audacity had taken Clara's breath away. Too vibrant? Was that even a real complaint? She tried compromise, arguing that the roses had been there for 20 years, long before Brenda bought her minimalist glass and steel monstrosity on the corner. But reason was water off a duck's back to Brenda, who only saw regulations and targets. The side twist, the thing that truly soured the air, was the rumor. A low, persistent hum in the neighborhood whispers that Brenda wanted Clara's lot, prime real estate backing onto the unused community walking path, perhaps to sell it to her sister, a known developer. The fines weren't about roses. They were about financial attrition, forcing a quick, cheap sale. The dread became a cold, heavy lump in Clara's stomach as the foreclosure date neared. She felt the weight of every neighbor's pitying glance, the sound of their silent apologies as they rushed past her yard, terrified of catching Brenda's eye. It was a pressure cooker of small-town politics and high-stakes real estate, all boiling over a bush of flowers. The day of the hearing arrived, a day that felt less like a quest for justice and more like a televised execution. Judge Thompson, a stout woman with a severe but fair expression, sat above the fray, her gavel resting like the sword of Damocles. Brenda was there, dressed impeccably in a power suit the color of freshly minted money, flanked by the HOA's expensive, shark-like counsel. Clara, wearing her best, slightly faded dress, felt impossibly small. Brenda's lawyer, Mr. Stern, opened with a dry, relentless recitation of the bylaws, presenting the thousands of dollars in fines and the undisputed violation of the aesthetic compatibility clause. He concluded with a triumphant smirk, "The Homeowners Association has demonstrated clear and persistent violation. The forfeiture of the property is, unfortunately, the only legal recourse." Clara felt a rush of heat to her face. Her eyes started stinging. Was this really how it ended? But before the judge could speak, Clara's pro bono attorney, a feisty, sharp-witted woman named Ava, rose slowly. Ava didn't talk about roses. She talked about corporate overreach, fiduciary duty, and discovery. "Your Honor," Ava began, her voice low but piercing, "we concede the roses were technically non-compliant. However, we have uncovered evidence that President Brenda Harrington failed to recuse herself from a vote that directly benefited her. A massive conflict of interest." Ava then produced two documents, First, a transcript of Brenda's email to her husband, stating, "Once Clara's house is gone, we can grab that lot for a steal and expand the pool area, or sell it to Jane for twice the price." The air in the courtroom instantly thickened. The silence so profound you could hear the distant traffic humming. But the real twist came with the second document. A little-known, archaic covenant in the Willow Creek Homeowners Association founding documents, Clause 7.f, which dictated the specific use of collected fines. The cumulative fines levied against Clara total $19,750. Ava stated, her eyes locking onto Brenda, whose expensive foundation couldn't hide the sudden pallor of her face. Clause 7.f dictates that any unallocated fine revenue exceeding $15,000 must be directed, with immediate effect, toward a specific public improvement project approved by a community-wide ballot. Brenda's eyes went wide with pure, unadulterated shock. "Wait, what is she talking about? This is insane," Brenda exclaimed, trying to stand up, only to be sharply waved down by the judge. Judge Thompson leaned forward, her gaze cool and assessing, first at Brenda's now crumpled composure, then at the details in the covenant. "Ms. Harrington, the evidence presented suggests that the enforcement of this clause was motivated by personal gain, and that the total unallocated fine amount now falls under the strict governance of Clause 7.f. Is that correct, Mr. Stern?" The Homeowners Association lawyer, suddenly looking very small and sweaty, stammered, "Why, yes, Your Honor, technically, that is correct." The courtroom held its breath. This wasn't just a simple ruling. This was the moment of righteous, agonizing karma. Judge Thompson finally spoke, and her voice, though measured, carried the weight of absolute authority. "The initial fines against Miss Clara Hayes are hereby voided, and the foreclosure notice is withdrawn. However," she paused, letting the word hang, heavy and final, "Ms. Harrington, acting as the president of the Homeowners Association which levied these funds, has demonstrated a significant failure in fiduciary responsibility by allowing this massive unallocated surplus to accrue and for engaging in obvious malfeasance. Therefore, as redress for the emotional distress and the misapplication of community funds, I hereby order that the $19,750, every single penny levied against Ms. Hayes' roses, be immediately used by the Willow Creek Homeowners Association to fund, construct, and maintain a new, public rose garden at the community's Central Park, a garden to be named, appropriately, the Clara Hayes Community Rose Garden." Brenda let out an audible, strangled gasp. "Furthermore," the judge continued, her gaze fixed on the now-silent Homeowners Association president, "Ms. Harrington will personally oversee the planting of every single bush and will present monthly photographic evidence to this court for the next 6 months." The gavel slammed down, thwack! A sound of finality, of justice served cold and floral. Brenda Harrington, the formidable Homeowners Association Karen, the woman who tried to take Clara's home over a few colorful bushes, was now legally mandated to become a public gardener, forced to spend her time honoring the very flowers she tried to eradicate. The look on her face, a blend of fury, disbelief, and utter defeat, was better than any lottery win. Clara felt the fear lift, replaced by a wave of pure, inspiring relief, knowing that sometimes, when the system seems rigged, the most poetic form of justice blooms brightest, reminding us all that true community spirit, unlike brittle bylaws, can never be foreclosed upon.